Hey, how's it going, everybody? Welcome back to a special weekend episode of the Truth Defender podcast. We are coming to you from the greatest country in the world, the great Republic of Texas, deep in the heart of the Lone Star State, Dallas, Texas, to be more specific. If you guys aren't already a subscriber, please consider hitting that subscribe button as well as that bell icon so you don't miss an episode when we go live or put an episode out. Also, don't forget to smash that like button. That'll really help us out with the algorithms as well. If you guys are on the go and you want to check us out, you can always find us on Spotify, Google, Apple Podcasts, as well as iHeartRadio and Amazon Music at Truth Defender Podcast. If you love what we do here on the show and you're feeling generous, please consider sharing the show with a friend, family member, or colleague. That'll really help us out as well. So we're still fighting the YouTube algorithms and I guess censorship side of the platform. Like I mentioned last time, we had about 7 episodes that were completely deleted from our page. Uh, so that was great. So all the episodes of Charlie Robinson, James Corbett on 9/11, all the episodes we had with Bishop Larry Gators are completely gone. So majority of those are like COVID related, I guess. The 9/11 one goes without saying. That was like, as soon as that one went out, it was gone like 2 weeks later. So that one was completely nuked. But like always, if you guys want to check this out, you can find those on Rumble as well. Spotify still has them up, and a lot of the other platforms that we have the podcast on. So those aren't completely wiped from the internet, but YouTube just doesn't like them. So it's kind of a retroactive I guess, review on a lot of different channels. I've seen a lot of podcasts that I watch have the same issue. So I don't know if it's because we're getting close to the elections and all that kind of stuff, but everything that's kind of related to like COVID and anything to do with like, I guess, Trump and the elections and all that kind of stuff is going down. So it's not anything that I'm surprised about. It's just really unfortunate. But yeah, you guys can check this out there. I'll have all the shows that are actually deleted posted down below in the show notes. You guys can take a look at those. But yeah, so we're gonna have a kind of two-parter here. We did an episode back on the high strangeness part of the channel on Sergeant Yeakey from the Oklahoma City Police Department back when the Oklahoma City bombing happened. So that's up there as well. That was kind of a little like an overview, I guess, of what was happening and how that whole thing went down. But today we're going to kind of go a little more in depth. I did want to have a kind of an update. There was a story, or I guess an episode that we did a while back on a journalist called James Gordon Meek. The whole story there was a little weird, to say the least. So we're going to kind of get a little bit of an update and see how that whole thing went down because there was some seriously interesting turn of events that went down and that whole thing that kind of wrapped it up. So yeah, we're gonna go ahead and speak with author investigator Matthew Gilman. He wrote a book on this previously, so we'll just kind of jump in and take a look at what's been going on since then. Matthew, how's it going, sir?
All right. And I would like to clarify, I'm not a licensed investigator.
Right. No worries. Yeah. It's just we kind of had this. Well, not kind of. We had a talk last time about this whole thing, which was kind of a weird happening in itself when it first started. So, like, I guess we can kind of break it down just real quick and just give everybody an update on who Mr. Meek was and like what was happening at the time that we did that episode, like why we were kind of speaking about him at the time. Can you kind of go over that a little bit?
Yeah, basic summary is April of 2022. James Gordon Meek has his apartment raided by the FBI. He disappears after that. Nobody had seen him. There was speculation that the FBI had actually grabbed him during the raid, but he quit his job as a working for, I believe it was NBC. He was working on a book about Operation Pineapple Express, which involved special forces and other aspects of spec ops who were trying to save people that had worked with us during the Afghan war. So he was part of that whole operation, which was kind of an embarrassment to the Biden administration at the time. He was on that project. He also worked on unredacted, I believe it's 3212. Don't quote me on those numbers. It's been a while. It was a documentary about this special operations event that happened in Africa where uh, a good number of our guys were killed in an ambush, and the Pentagon was covering that up. He was able to get a copy of the report that the Pentagon had put out, and he was able to fill in some of the gaps as to the names of people in charge of the operation who had been redacted. And he put that whole story together and showed how the Pentagon had screwed up and basically put these guys in a bad situation. So Meek has his place rated. Originally on the warrant, it said that it was for classified documents in his possession. At least that's what Rolling Stone had initially reported. Come to find out later, they also had on there that they speculated he was in possession of CP or child pornography. That was left out of the article, and there's reasons one way or another that people have been claiming that happened. They believe that one of the uh, editors over in Rolling Stone who personally knew Meek had taken that out of the article. There's been a bunch of updates on this. The reporter who originally wrote the story about Meek's raid, she was dealing, I believe, with her mom being sick in the hospital, so she wasn't involved in the editing process. The article was greenlit. It went to publish. She noticed a bunch of stuff that she had reported on had been taken out. Uh, but this is all alleged. Like she had left Rolling Stone after this article was released. It was a big article for her, and even afterwards, she ended up with a better job with better pay at a bigger company,
Right.
and she was still like, "I am so upset about this article."
Mhm.
um, which is it's kind of weird that somebody who had been so wronged in the past ended up in such a better place when she comes out complaining about it. Uh,
Yeah.
so at the time that we did our last interview, Meek had reemerged. Somebody had spotted him outside of his mother's house, where he had been staying for about 9 months at that time. And a few days after he was spotted, he was charged not for the possession of classified documents, which, as a reporter, he's legally able to be in possession of. There's nothing stopping him from getting that. Uh, but they did charge him with possession of child pornography. However, how they ended up getting that evidence is also really sketchy, considering that he allegedly had it in a Dropbox account. Um, Dropbox has a privacy policy where they don't search it, they don't look into it. You can put stuff in there, store it. You could have classified documents in there. You could have family photos, right? You could have all kinds of stuff in a Dropbox. Now, the story gets weird with that because the FBI says that Dropbox contacted them about things that they found in Meek's Dropbox, which,
Hmm.
if it was just Dropbox looking in there, they already violated their own policies. It doesn't make any sense.
Right.
When Dropbox was asked about it, they said that they had received information about the possibility of this material being in Meek's Dropbox. But at the same time, they also refused to say who had reported this information. And that kind of gives the question of like, who would have the authority or be in a position where they can just go to Dropbox and say, hey, we believe this is in there. Can you check for us? Doesn't make any sense. Uh, so they handed over the material to the FBI. The FBI didn't have a warrant for it. So that was one thing Meek's lawyers were trying to have taken out as evidence was, you illegally obtained this material and we don't think it should be able to be used in court. Also, we'd like to have the confidential files that Meek had as evidence in court because we believe that's why he's being targeted.
Right.
And the CP was allowed to stay, and the confidential documents was not. During the discovery process of the court hearing, Meek's lawyers were going to the FBI saying, "All right, we want all the material that you were able to gather. We know that you have possession of 4 laptops, his cell phone. What did you find?" And their reply was, "We don't have anything." So
Mm.
then, the question was, were these items searched? And this is 6 months after he had already been charged and they were getting ready to go to court. And the FBI came back and said, "We didn't search any of the laptops." It didn't make any sense. Like, you have this guy on possession of child pornography, possible distribution of said material, and yet you're not going to search any of the laptops when you're going into court trying to put this guy away for a long time. Uh, it, that None of that made any sense to me. There's also leaks of communications that Meek allegedly had on. Um, God, I'm trying to remember. Not Snapchat. It's it's one of those like texting things that's supposed to be secure.
Like
It's
a not a Snapchat, but like a Telegram or like WhatsApp or whatever.
Yeah, I think it might have been a Telegram. Allegedly, he was saying stuff on there about certain things that he was into, and uh, but then again, it's like this is all online stuff, and you actually have his physical devices in your hands. You're not like trying to prove that this phone was used for the telegram messages, this laptop was how he got the stuff in the Dropbox. None of that's happening. Like, they're not doing any of that. And so eventually he ends up with this plea bargain where it doesn't go to trial or anything. He's been sitting in jail for God knows how long at that point. I think it was up to like 6 months. He's already been sitting in jail waiting to go to trial. And, all the evidence that they wanted to bring forth in his defense wasn't allowed. So, yeah, the thing is, usually when they're trying to push a plea bargain, one of their big arguments is you either take this, if you go to trial and waste our time, effort, and money on this thing that we want to put you in prison for, you're going to do more time than if you just take the plea bargain.
Right.
so, so that's really where Meek was pushed in to that position, and ever since then, there's been kind of this like shadow campaign of like pushing Meek's guilt on the internet that I've noticed. There was a fake meme that was uh, uh, on Twitter and Reddit and a few other places where it showed a picture of Meek, and it was talking about this news article that he allegedly wrote about debunking Pizzagate and how they're trying to
Mm.
say, "Look, convicted pedophile. He was trying to say Pizzagate was fake."
Right.
And at the same time, it's like, dude, I looked through every article he wrote. Like, he never talked about Pizzagate. That's not a thing. And yet you had these big accounts that were sharing this, like Jake Paul, I think, shared a copy of it, and a couple of other well-known people were like, "Oh, look at this stuff." Um, and a couple other things I came across was occasionally I'd put tweets out there, like if there was an update about Meek, and I would share it. I'm like, I'm still not convinced that this guy is 100% guilty of what they say he is.
Right.
And I would either get, like, in one instance, I got this lengthy email from somebody claiming that he was the father of one of the victims. Um, but a bunch of the information that he used, for one, some of the evidence he tried showing us to, like, well, Meek's a liar and this proves it. It's like, well, that was in my book, so I already knew that. And then some of the other stuff involved other CP cases that were going to be coming up in the Virginia, DC area that were linked to Meek.
Right.
But I have found like nothing, like no public news articles, records of people in these, because they were listing off like high status positions of power, or one was like a news producer or something that was going to be indicted. Another was, I think, linked to the UN or something, but nothing. Like there hasn't been anything. So um, I tried reaching out to them, pointing out my position and why I was questioning the things that I was questioning. Never got any kind of response. They said that allegedly we had talked on Twitter previously, and I I don't have any record of that. So um, I really have no idea who this person was. And another another interesting one was a woman allegedly. I mean, it's Twitter.
Right.
I checked out their account and I'm like, this doesn't sound like a chick at all. Like some of the language that was being used, the topics that were being talked about. Um, but at one point they said, well, yeah, Meek was targeted because of what he was working on, but the CP was real. And I'm like, okay, well, which is it? Like, I mean, I
Yeah.
suppose both could be true, but it just doesn't, and the email, the other guy, when he was saying that, they kept him in his position because of the compromise on him, knowing what he's into. That way he could regulate what stories got out and stuff. But I'm like, look at the stories he was doing. Like, this isn't anything that if you had an agent who was compromised or a person in a position of power who's compromised, why would you be letting these stories get out? It doesn't make any sense. So, yeah, Meek was, I believe he was sentenced to 6 years. He could be out in three. I think he's already served maybe one of them. Um, yeah, it's still, everything about it is just highly suspect as to what's going on. It's weird that the moment he was charged, like everybody on the internet just like completely dropped the subject.
Right.
uh,
No,
Completely.
it's odd because you see a lot of like high profile cases with other individuals, and then all of a sudden, like they just magically find child porn on their computers, like out of nowhere, right? So it's like it's happened more than a few times. It's not even like I'm making it up or anything like that. It's just so weird that whenever there's some kind of like a high profile case going on or they're going after somebody for whatever reason, and then it's just kind of like the fallback. It's like the go-to. All of a sudden, this dude's been like
Hmm.
trafficking child porn for years and years, and he's just into this kind of like crazy stuff going on. Um, it's not. I mean, of course, we gotta say that all of this is alleged, right? So we don't know for sure like what's going on if they really did, and we'll probably never know. But just kind of judging it based off of the kind of cases he was working on previously and like what he was getting into, it's not far fetched to think that they just wanted him out of the way and discredited. And like the biggest way to do that is obviously to label somebody as a pedophile or anything, related to the topic. And once people hear that, then like everything else is just out the door. Like, regardless of what he was working on and if it was true or not, once you have that freaking pedophile freaking title next to your name, like everything you've done prior to that is just over, which rightfully so, right? Like if that's really what was going on, then fuck that guy and all that kind of stuff, right? But like
Hmm.
it's not true, then it's like a bigger issue, obviously. But um yeah, it's sad that all the topics that he was covering and like reporting on, they were legitimate stuff, to do with the government and all that kind of stuff.
Well, and
You could-
this was a guy who, for years, he had contacts, like international contacts, right? Like he was in Afghanistan twice. Personally knew special forces guys. He was constantly reporting on terrorist activities in different countries and traveling all over the place. And yet they just let him roam around for 9 months while they were putting this case together against him. It didn't make any sense, right? Like, I think the initial, I'm almost wondering if the Rolling Stone article is what screwed him, because it's almost like they initially said, okay, we have this. If you don't keep your mouth shut, this is what's going to happen to you.
Right.
Because he wasn't charged. He wasn't like, at- allegedly at the time that they raided his apartment, they had possession of his Dropbox, like the stuff that was in there. So why wouldn't you put him in a cell at that point in time and start getting ready to charge him, especially if grabbing his laptops and his cell phone and everything else that they might have taken out of his apartment, if you were so concerned about his involvement in child pornography and yet you don't bother searching the laptops before trial, it sounds like they were just more looking to shut him up above everything else. Like that wasn't even on the radar until it came out that like this dude disappeared.
Right. Yeah, it's sad, man. It's just rough that I have no doubt that that's just was just a way to get him out of the way and, just kind of discredit him. Well, not kind of like completely discredit him. Um, for a lot of the people that would, followed his work and all that kind of stuff, they know, like, you don't have to be just reading his articles and the kind of stuff that he was working on and like actually covering from the war and all that kind of stuff. If you have read all that kind of stuff and you know him and his work, it's not far fetched to think that he just knew too much and they just wanted him out of the way. So
Well, and that's what
that's
Tucker said on Joe Rogan
yeah,
recently when he was on there. He was like, the one thing that members of Congress fear the most is the deep state and the intelligence agencies, because if they want you out of the way, they'll just put CP on your computer. And
yeah,
so
it's true.
it's like,
It's just how it goes nowadays, man. It's working in like the IT space and like cybersecurity world. I know all too well how easy it is to just, remote into somebody's computer and then you can just add whatever you want on there without them knowing, without anybody knowing. Obviously, there's like a footprint, obviously, but that's easy to get rid of as well. For the most part, it's never fully gone completely. So it can be found, but you'd have to be somebody that has a lot of time on hands and a lot of funding and access to a lot of great tech in order to find stuff like that. And, like the common man or even people that work at like the police departments and the cybersecurity teams, stuff like that, that's not as in depth as you would think. So it'd be hard to find. So it's some very powerful people that have access to that kind of stuff. And just based off of what they added to his computer, like you just know that some random person doesn't have access to that kind of stuff. It's way
mhm.
up there. Like you have to be like in the know and know how to do all kinds of stuff. And I know a few government contractors that deal with like cybersecurity kind of stuff for the government, and you have access to a lot of great tech that nobody else even knows exists. So that's kind of how you know where that whole line is drawn. But it's unfortunate. It's hopefully he doesn't end up dying in prison, which which is a very real possibility considering what they labeled him as. And you know, if anybody knows anything about pedophiles and going into prison,
Oh, you mean like don't Epstein me, bro? like, like
exactly,
my shirt
it's exactly
says.
that. Yeah. So I mean, they put him in the worst place possible for a pedophile. So if he makes it out, it's gonna be interesting to see like how they continue to mess with his life, or if he even goes back to reporting on anything that's actually meaningful. So uh, hopefully he does, but I hope it's not true. I mean, I've read a few of his articles from the past, and I can understand why they completely freaking railroaded him on all this stuff. So it sucks, but we'll see what happens.
Right.
Yeah, I guess we'll move on here to why we're really here for everybody. So yeah, we did a show like I mentioned previously. Just it was like a quick 10-15 minute one, just kind of an overview. Um, so Oklahoma City bombing, April 19th, 1995. Timothy McVeigh parks a truck in front of the Alfred Murrah Federal Building, downtown Oklahoma, and then proceeds to commit mass murder. The building was completely destroyed. Half of it completely came down. Obviously, a shit ton of people died. Um, that in itself is, or still is, kind of a giant government kind of conspiracy cover up, considering people that had relations to the building and what was going on in there and all that kind of stuff. FBI was in there, and whatever. But um, what's more interesting is Sergeant Yeakey. Obviously, after all that whole thing happened, how he got involved and how he actually his life ended up after that. So, can you kind of take us through the turn of events and how it all kind of started that morning?
Yeah, well, I was gonna back up a little bit with Yeekey, because he joined the police department back in, I believe it was '89. He was also in the army as an MP, and he was over in Desert Shield and Desert Storm when all that went down with Iraq. And, and he was one of the MPs who was in charge of like all these POWs are coming in, all these Iraqis are giving up, and he's he's one of the guys that's got to figure out like what the hell to do with all these people. He was also in the area where when the oil wells were set on fire, like it's raining oil over everyone and everything. So he ended up with some health complications from that. Uh, After the war was over, he went back to working in Oklahoma City as a police officer. He starts seeing a doctor named Chumley. He's gonna eventually come back into the story again later for a lot of the health issues that he was having. So him and Chumley, he was a patient of his from '92 to '93, dealing with like skin issues, a couple of other issues that might have been related to Gulf War syndrome that a lot of guys were dealing with. And then he was also, when he was over in Desert Storm, he was also there with Officer Vassar, who's also in the same Army unit as him. And him and Vassar were close friends. And Vassar recently came up again from the No Way Jose podcast, where he was interviewed on there for the first time, discussing his relationship with Terrance and things that he's discovered over the years about the Oklahoma City bombing. Uh, but yeah, Terry was one of the first, if not the first, cop on duty to show up at the bombing site. He was working on I believe it was a speeding ticket with a woman when the bomb went off, and then he handed her all of her stuff back and immediately drove down there and started pulling people out. He was said to have saved anywhere between 4 to 8 people from the bomb site um, while he was at the bomb site. So there was Yeekey, Dr. Chumley, who knew Yeekey. He was one of the first responders that showed up to help give aid and everything. And one of the things Chumley saw was he was approached by an ATF agent who was requesting medical assistance. And Chumley quickly looked the guy over and was like, "You're not injured. Like, get the hell out of here." And when
Right.
the agent went to somebody else demanding to be bandaged up or something to show that he had been injured during the blast, Chumley stepped in and said, "You're wasting everybody's time and effort and energy. You need to get the hell out of here." So Chumley kind of knew something was up during the bombing. Um, Vassar, he was also one of the first responders, but he was on the other side of the building. He never saw Yeekey that day. He was basically doing the same thing everyone else was doing, trying to get people out, trying to help as much as possible. And he had actually seen John Doe number two in the Ryder truck because where he was working on duty, the Ryder truck had driven by and he, for whatever reason, noticed it and saw somebody in the passenger seat. And so he put in his report for the day that he had seen John Doe number two in the Ryder truck. Um, and years later, I don't remember what exactly he was working for the police department, like what his job was, but he had access to the records. So he decided years later he went back and he tried to find his old report because he was like, I saw somebody else in that truck, and he couldn't find that report. And then he tried looking for Yeekey's report from the day of the bombing, and Yeekey's report wasn't there. And so that kind of got him questioning as to what the hell was going on and why his friend was dead. Um, So yeah, the other thing that happened was Chumley and Yeekey also saw a guy named Michael Laudenschlager, and this was a guy who had worked in the Murrah building. And weeks prior to the bombing, he had filed a complaint about how the ATF was storing explosives, ammo, all kinds of different ordnance. They had tow missiles that apparently were for
Yeah.
those are supposed to be for training purposes. And he's like, we have a daycare center in here, and civilians come in. Like, they can't be storing this stuff in here. So of course, when he files this complaint to try to get things taken care of and the rules followed, he lost his job.
Hmm.
Then he went to the woman who runs the daycare center and said, "Hey, just so you know, this stuff is in the building. You might want to, report it or try to get some things changed." She ends up losing her job. So Laudenschlager, when the bombing happens, he's thinking it's the stuff that the ATF was storing in the building. So he
Right.
shows up. He's trying to help. People had seen him there rescuing people and giving people aid. A few days later, he's found in the building dead, and he's not listed officially as one of the victims of the bombing. And
Mm.
so, uh, also, I believe from interviews I've heard with Tanya Yeakey, which was Terry's ex-wife at the time, but most people consider that it's his widow. She said that that Yeakey knew Laudenschlager and knew him as a stand-up guy, and if he had any inclination that Laudenschlager was killed, that he might have pursued things afterwards as well. But yeah, you have all these people that are, bodies are stacking up, and it's not even from the bombing. Um, Yeekey and Chumley, after the bombing, they started working together, collecting information that they had gathered. Anything that they could find that told the story of like what really happened that day.
Right.
They had a safe deposit box at a bank that they both kept, where they could like put information that they had collected in there to make sure that it was safe and secure. After Yeekey died, that was found to be empty. Uh, Chumley, he died several months after the Oklahoma City bombing from a mysterious plane accident,
Yeah.
where this is a guy, he had 700 hours of flight experience. He knew how to fly. Like, the thing is, he was on a routine flight. I, I don't remember the destinations. I can't remember if he was flying to Dallas or what it was. But mid-flight, all of a sudden, like, plane totally loses control, nosedives into a field, and afterwards, during the investigation, they can't find any mechanical issues with the plane whatsoever. Um, so yeah, Chumley died before Yeekey did. And, that was mysterious as well. Um, I've got notes on the side of my computer so I could keep this
All right.
organized. So while Terry was helping rescuing people, he slipped, fell up to 2 stories inside the building into the basement.
Yeah.
Um, I believe he had fallen underneath where the daycare center was, and his back was injured. He had to be rescued himself. So after he's pulled out, he's taken to the hospital. Tanya's called to come pick him up, um, and he's distraught. He's As soon as they get into the car, he says to her, "It's not what they're saying it is. What they're saying, what happened, that's not what happened." And she doesn't really know what he's referring to. And from people who talked to Yeekey afterwards, there was a group that was assembled
Right.
uh, at a house, and the house was belonging to Ramona McDonald, and she had kids who were in the daycare center, and she knew about the Laudenschlager complaints that had been filed, and she knew that things were just like really suspicious. So this group got together, and it was Yeekey, Chumley, Craig Roberts had ended up joining it, uh, and a few other people. and they would get together and they would, share information that they had discovered and kind of piled all of their evidence together at McDonald's house. And so, um, I'm trying to figure out where the heck how I got here. um, so yeah, Terry was injured, and a day later, he slept something like 18 hours after he was injured and taken home. And as soon as he woke up, he found out that Bill Clinton was coming to Oklahoma City and that they were going to have this, and that uh, he was going to be seeing the site and everything. And Terry needed to get to the Murrah building ASAP. So he gets up, he's still injured, grabs a camera. Him and Tanya go to the building that night, and he's trying to get in because he saw something that was in the basement that he needed proof of. But he wouldn't tell Tanya what it was. He told a couple of other people at McDonald's place uh, that he might have seen like unexploded ordnance in the basement, something that had not gone off. Um, so he wasn't allowed back in. He was threatened by one of the agents that was guarding the site. There were some words back and forth, and the agent said, "You were told not to ever come back here." The guy who rescued 8 people. um, so he wasn't able to get in. He ends up writing an 8-page report on the things that he had seen that day and tried to turn it in to a superior officer, and they refused it. They said, "We want this down to 1 page. You're going to cut out all the bullshit, and that's what you're going to turn in." Um, Years later, we find out that Ramona McDonald had actually seen a copy of the 8-page report that Yeakey had written, along with a few other people at her house. So we do know that the report existed, and for about a year afterwards, Terry was constantly harassed. His wife was being harassed. Like, she was finding nails and screws in her tire. There's one point in time where there was a balloon that was just left in the middle of her living room that she didn't know where it came from. I forget what was written on it. There was something written on the balloon. It was like, "We're watching you," or something like that. Um, all kinds of stuff to like freak her out.
Yeah.
And so she was being harassed. Meanwhile, Terry, he's trying to figure out like what the hell happened at the Murrah building. Um, and he's gathering information along with everybody else, and there's speculation that he possibly had gotten a hold of the VHS tape with all the surveillance cameras showing the Murrah building at the time of the explosion. We know that this tape existed because there was an FBI agent who tried to sell it to a news agency. I believe it was in Florida. He wanted $1 million for the tape. Now, the reporters wanted to verify that this thing was real, so they went to a local sheriff's house where the sheriff was present, the reporters were present, the FBI agent showed up. They watched the tape. It showed John Doe number 2 getting out of the truck. It showed the explosion. Of course, that tape disappeared. The agent was fired. But there's also information showing that the Oklahoma City Police Department would have had a copy of it. So at one point in time, Terry brings this VCR over to Tanya's house, and he throws the VCR in the back of her car and says, "Don't lose this. Keep an eye on it." And she just doesn't question him. She takes it home. Um, After Terry dies, uh, the VCR disappears. Like, it's no longer in her house, stolen, it's gone. Um, and along with all the other information that Terry brought, had compiled together, That was allegedly in his car at the time that it was discovered in El Reno. This was May of 96. So the day before, Terry has lunch with Ramona, says he's meeting with some agents who are curious about what he's been looking into. She doesn't trust it and says, Terry, be careful. And he's like, well, somebody's got to be interested in the truth. I got to take this chance. The next day, his car is discovered in El Reno, Oklahoma, and and I got to point this out, Canadian County, because during the story it gets a little confusing because they talk about the Canadian Sheriff's Department, and it sounds like why are Canadians and dealing with U.S.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's a Canadian deputy that finds the car. The inside is completely covered in blood. The windows, the side panels of the doors, it's on the dashboard. There's just blood everywhere. It was described as somebody had stuck a pig and let it bleed out in the car.
Dang.
And so that's when they start searching for him because he's not in the car. The doors were locked, and there was a box of files and other material that was in the car. So they start searching for him. Hours later, they end up finding him in a field that's a mile and a half away from the car. So when they find the body, there's a single gunshot wound to the head, but it's not, for one, it's not in the mouth, it's up here, but it's at a downward angle. So the bullet goes through his head and comes out his cheek. And there's also no powder burns on his skin. Uh, they never said what caliber gun was used. There was no gun that was found at the site where his body was, but it was still labeled as a suicide. Uh, they tried saying it was a small caliber pistol, but I don't know of any small calibers that will go through a skull. Usually, like a 22 will bounce around inside the skull because it doesn't have enough power to penetrate back out.
Right.
His service pistol, that's the other thing. He told Ramona the day before he wasn't bringing his service pistol with him because he didn't want it used on him. So they don't know what happened to his service pistol. The day that his body was found, hours earlier in the morning, the Oklahoma City Police Department went to Terry's house and picked up his squad car and brought it back to the station for no reason. Like, he hadn't been reported missing yet. Nobody knew he was dead. But for some reason, they started taking his stuff related to his job before he was even discovered over in El Reno. And so the other injuries to his body, he had cut marks on his wrist, his upper arms, up by where the veins in his biceps would be, both jugulars. Somebody had tried to cut down into those, bruising to the face. There were cuff marks on his wrist and his ankles. And yet, for some reason, this dude committed suicide is what they came up with. Obviously, to me, it sounds like the work of two guys at least.
Right.
I think he was restrained in the car, and that's where they tried to kill him. But for one reason or another, they decided to take him out in the field. And I don't know, maybe it was taking too long. Maybe the guy just wouldn't die. I mean, he seems like one of those really stubborn dudes that just doesn't matter what you do to him. Like, you just can't put him down. But yeah, the other thing with the suicide is that it was in Canadian County in Oklahoma, so they had jurisdiction.
Okay.
But the El Reno Federal Prison was right next door. So after his body is discovered, a helicopter flies in, and you have the chief of police from Oklahoma City PD and FBI agents who take over the scene. And right away they declare it a suicide, but FBI, they don't investigate suicides. They had no jurisdiction. And Oklahoma City PD, it was outside of their jurisdiction, but they claim that it was because it was one of their officers.
Okay.
And meanwhile, you have Canadian deputies going all over the place trying to find the weapon that he used to kill himself. They never did. And the other interesting thing about El Reno, the prison over there, it's the same prison that had Timothy McVeigh originally. That's where they had him locked up before he was transferred. It's also the prison where Kenneth Trinidu was murdered by FBI agents thinking that he was John Doe number 2. And that's a whole nother murder mystery about somebody related to OKC that was killed by the government, and his brother Jesse for 30 plus years now has been on a rampage trying to get some type of justice for his brother who was killed in the prison over there. But a lot of shady stuff happens over in El Reno.
So it's just wild. Like, obviously, with no burn marks or any kind of powder marks on the back of his head, um, that would lead me to think that some kind of suppressor was used, but like at a nice distance, nothing too up close to the skull. Definitely further away than he'd be able to do if he was trying to commit suicide. But like the angle you said from up here, shooting down behind the head,
Mm-hmm.
it's like sometimes when I hear these stories about people that are murdered and they're reported as suicides, it's like things like this are done on purpose, like because it's not feasible. You would think that people that work for the government, like CIA agencies or like professional hitmen or whatever, would make things look as if the person themselves had committed suicide. Right? That would be like the one requirement that you would have. But every time you see these kinds of like weird government cover-ups about people that commit suicide, it's always like they were hanging from a tree and then they shot themselves with a shotgun like twice in the
Oh, that
chest,
guy. I remember that
or
story.
like, but like they make it like they're trying to cover it up, but at the same time they're trying to like throw it in your face at the same time, just to kind of let you know that like, yeah, it's a suicide, but like, come on, we all know it's not a suicide, right? Like they're trying to leave, like they're trying to like let you know, like, don't fuck with us because this is what happens. And also we're just gonna classify it as a suicide and no one's gonna say anything, even though you all know it's not. But what are you gonna do about it? You know what I mean? Like that's always like what it
Yeah.
comes down to. Everybody that has something like this, it's always some kind of weird nonsense. Like they hang
Well,
from a tree with shotguns or they shoot from weird angles and he shot like twice or three times in the back of the head. After the
oh
first
yeah. Yeah.
time, like after the first time, if I'm not gonna shoot myself in the back of the head, but like if I was trying to commit suicide and that first one doesn't go, like at that point, there's two people. Either you're really committed to killing yourself and you're gonna just go for it and you're gonna try again, or the shock of not dying the first time and the pain, all that's gonna like stop you from trying it and you're just gonna try to get help after that. So it's these people are really committed to killing themselves in like the weirdest ways. It's odd.
Yeah. And the thing with Yeekey, there's two side notes with that. One, um, in the Oklahoma City Police Department afterwards, any officer who kind of questioned the superiors or didn't follow the script with things after that, like other officers would go to him and be like, "Hey, you better knock that shit out, or you might get yeekied." And that became like a thing over there. But the other thing with Yeekey is they're trying to say that he got out of his car. Now, to get to the spot where he was found, he would have had to have gone over a stream, climbed over a barbed wire fence, go through rough terrain for almost a mile and a half, and then decide to shoot himself. while he's got sickle cell, and he's already bled 3 to 4 pints of blood. And there was also dirt that was found in the cuts in his wrist, kind of showing that he was probably dragged there. I'm guessing because he was a big dude. He was 6 foot plus, and they described him being built like a linebacker.
Yeah.
So he was like, I think maybe 250 weight wise. Like one dude is not dragging him a mile and a half. That's not happening.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I've seen the pictures of him. He was a pretty big dude. Uh, yeah. I mean, it's definitely odd because I mean, you would think like you commit suicide and you park your car somewhere like in a parking lot or off the side of the road and they just find you in there. But like to be to like walk out a distance into whatever area you're in and then shoot yourself out there after I don't know, like what he got all these injuries like falling out of his car or like it's just like what's going on, like he tripped on his way out there and then all of a sudden he has all these cuts and bruises and stuff. So I mean, it's just like I said, like it's one of those things where everybody obviously knows it's not what happened, right? Because
Yeah.
just because of that kind of stuff, like he was beat up and bruised and cut and all that stuff. So everybody knows, but it's just like that extra cherry on top. It's like just the weirdest way to die, to commit suicide, whatever. And it's just like they just dare you to like say anything. It's like, oh yeah, it's not true, and like we all know it's not true, but like, what are you gonna do? I dare you to say something, and so it's just odd. I mean, the whole thing with Oklahoma City bombing and just like the things that were in the building and people related to it. And at one point, wasn't there some kind of a relationship with like the Clintons as well at some point with the whole FBI building?
Yeah.
There,
I'm gonna say yes and no because the whole was it Whitewater was that investigation was taking place. I've heard several theories. I've heard that the paperwork for the Whitewater scandal was stored there, and sure as shit, if you do a timeline, like Hillary and everybody else was pretty much exonerated not long after OKC. Um, but they're claiming that the paperwork was in there for that. The paperwork for all the lawsuits regarding the Gulf War syndrome lawsuit that was going on.
mm,
A bunch of soldiers were suing for that, and somehow all the medical records disappeared. Um, God, there was something else. There was another investigation that was happening. Oh, all the paperwork for the Mena Airport drug smuggling in Mena, Arkansas. That apparently had been moved there to eliminate the paper trail between the governor's office and the CIA and all the cocaine that was coming into the country at the time. That was another one that was allegedly in the building. And uh, I have seen photos of firefighters after the bombing, and it seemed to be during the times that there were the bomb scares where they would say there's another bomb and it's bigger than the first one. Well, how do you know it's bigger than the first one? It doesn't make any sense.
right.
But that's what they were yelling. Um, but during those times where everybody's pulled out, there's photos of firefighters hauling out boxes of files from the building, and nobody could figure like what would be so important in the building that even if you had a case that you wanted to say, like somebody was so evil that you had to make sure that they went to prison and you had to secure all the evidence, it's already compromised. The building
Yeah.
was blown. Like, so why are you going in for files? Uh, so that didn't make any sense. And there was speculation that there was another bomb in the basement, and this could have been what Yeekey had seen, that was attached to the gas line in order to try to make it look like it was a gas main explosion as opposed to a truck bomb. Like it'd be really convenient if the whole building came crashing down, all evidence is destroyed, um, one way or another. And so there's a lot of theories as to how many bombs there were, whether the truck bomb was really like some type of mini nuke. That's something that's popped up here and there, and um, whether or not they rigged explosives in the building beforehand. Because if you go back to the Trade Center bombing a few years prior, it was a van uh, uh, with enough explosives that if it had been at one certain support column in the basement parking garage, like the whole tower would have come down. But the dude parked it in the wrong spot because there was already a car there. So like when it went off, people were killed and there was damage, but it didn't bring down the trade center. So it's like, did they learn their lesson from that? Like, we can't just rely on a truck bomb. We're going to have to also rig the columns just in case it doesn't work.
Yeah. You know what? It's kind of terrifying to think that, like, in order to cover up what the government is willing to do, if that's the case, allegedly, of course, we'll always say that. I don't know for sure. I don't want any people coming after me, but allegedly, the lengths that the government would be willing to go to cover up any kind of wrongdoing. If obviously, like you mentioned before, there was a daycare in the building, so if they wanted to bring that entire building down, they'd have no issue murdering innocent children to do so. Same thing that you can. Why I don't put it past the government as well, allegedly, was with 9/11 as well, when Donald Rumsfeld came out and said that they were missing $2.3 trillion. They had no idea where it was. And then all of a sudden, like, the Pentagon explodes in the exact same area where all those files as well, they were investigating. That was like the one area that the plane crashed into and,
Right.
like, destroyed all the records, and
Yep.
like, it was all gone, you know? So it's like the lengths and the coincidences are just too much to, like, to just to think that, like, it's just a coincidence, you know? It I could see how maybe 1 or 2 times, but it's not just like these events. It just makes absolutely no sense that $2.3 trillion is unaccounted for, and then all of a sudden the area where they're investigating just gets destroyed, and it's just that one spot, and, like, out of nowhere, they would just happen to know, like, where to hit it, and, it's just weird. It's completely I don't believe any of it, but, like, at what point, like, do you keep screaming it for everybody to hear before they call you crazy? And that's just pretty much what they expect anyways, so it's hard because we all know it's not true, but there's just no way to prove it.
Yeah, it's one of those things I've been struggling with recently is, you could have all the evidence. Like, you could actually present a case in court, right? Like, you could collect everything to show that this is what happened, as opposed to the official story. And it's like, is anything going to change? Like, we pretty much know what happened to Kennedy now, and yet there's not going to be a trial. Like, anybody who is directly involved with what had happened, they're gone. So, like, as opposed to just rewriting history books, it's like, what exactly happens afterwards, you know? Um, and that's the thing with OKC is we know other people were involved, and yet they say it was just McVeigh. But then we also we also have this guy Terry Nichols who's rotting in prison, even though it was just McVeigh. And there's all the sketches of John Doe number 2, but it was just McVeigh. Yeah, there's all the information, and everything has been gathered afterwards to show that there was a bigger picture and a bigger plot and more people involved in what they say. And yet, like I said, unless you're just rewriting a history book, it I don't know. I guess that's why I kind of focus on things like James Gordon Meek, and some of the other, like, there's another guy that's it was mentioned in the updated version of Between the Lines, Josh Schulte, and this is a book regarding his case. Apparently, he was an independent contractor working for the CIA, and they're blaming him for the Vault 7 cyber leaks. And one of the things that they did was, so they're pointing the finger at him for leaking all the information, and it's a very weak case. And then they throw in like, "Oh, we found CP on his work computer,"
Yeah.
which, if you're a private contractor working for the C, are you going to be that dumb? And there was a story. I can't. What year was it? Like 2018. There's a story that came out. They did a report with contractors working for the CIA, Department of Defense, uh, where they just analyzed all the work computers. And they found like 3,000 employees had CP on their computer, and it's like, my question was it put there on purpose in case they speculated that somebody might go, uh, what's his name? Edward Snowden on them, right?
Mm.
Like, what if they thought, like, oh, this guy, he's got too many files. He might be, oh, CP, like, got to get him out the door. So,
Or they were just coming up for quarterly reviews and they just didn't want to pay up for any kind of bonuses or raises for everybody and they're just getting rid of people nonstop. But it's I mean that's the only like logical thing you could think of. Because I mean, you would think all these contractors and like people that work within the government, like you just know that they're just watching all of your stuff all the time. And I'm pretty sure in these non-disclosure agreements, they have some kind of like lines or like bylines that say like we monitor personal devices or like any devices that are handed out by the agency is like being monitored. Like that's I was in the military. I used to deal with CyberNet and all that kind of stuff. It's like military cyber stuff and like online with if you're like on an installation. I used to work at a secret installation. I had a secret clearance as well. Like any computer that you use on site is monitored completely. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. Any kind of personal device that you take on site had to be locked up in a lockbox. It couldn't be anywhere near like fiber optic lines or anything like that because people that know what they're doing can log on to your personal device and they can hop onto the local network on site. It's so you have to like have certain distance between like your cell phone and the fiber optics like that are hanging in the walls and stuff. They have to be locked in a lockbox and all kinds of crazy stuff. Like if you work for the government, like how do you not know that they're watching you like 24 even when you go home they're watching you. They're watching all your personal devices whether you like that or not and it's you can blame that on freaking Bush and 9/11 and the Patriot Act and all that kind of stuff, and I'm sure they were doing that kind of crap even before then, but, like, it's just you just have to know that they're watching you 24/7 no matter what you do, your family, your wife, your kids' stuff, it's all being watched at home, your smart TVs and all that kind of crap, it's they're listening to you, like, as you sit there at home watching porn at night on your freaking smart TV, like, they're watching you, they're listening to everything you're saying.
oh, they
Like,
have so many dick pics. It's not even crazy.
it's I don't know how people that work in the government can just sit there and watch that all the time. We're just like, "Oh, here's another one." Here's I'm pretty sure they have like a weird stash where they all laugh at it and it's just like a group Slack within the company and they all just make fun of people's dick pics online. It's like,
Well, there's that one woman that she was a contractor. I forget what agency, but they raided her house and they found something like 20 million dick pics that she had collected. First of all, how are you ever going to see that many? Why would you want to? I mean,
what are you doing with them? It's weird. It's odd. But I mean, like, it kinda goes to, like, again, like I said, the lengths that the government would go to silence one person or try to discredit anybody, like, you and I on the local level or anybody else, that's nothing. I mean, they went into Libya. I don't know if it's directly related, but I mean, Gaddafi gave speeches about, like, JFK and, like, how he was assassinated and, like, by who and this and that, and then all of a sudden, like they just overthrew Libya and he was just out. I don't know if that's had anything to do with it, but it wouldn't be too far fetched to think that our government was just like, hey, this dude we might want to invade Libya for other reasons or whatever. We want to get him out of there. But he's also talking about JFK. So, that's kind of kill two birds with one stone. I mean, he was giving like on several occasions, like speeches for more than an hour during general assemblies at the UN and all that kind of stuff about like who killed JFK and like swine flu and all this kind of stuff. Like he was just out there talking mad crap, whether it was true or not. And I think it was true, but like they just couldn't have any of that shit out there. And so they're just like, you know what? We'll just make it seem like we need a new dictator in Libya and like we want to go in for resources or whatever. But also on the back end, like she's talking about JFK and all this other crap. Let's do something about it. So I don't have no doubt that they go in and overthrow countries just to keep secrets that they don't want out. That's not far fetched. I don't think, at least. I mean, assassinating dictators and other leaders, like world leaders, it's not outside the realm of possibility. Not in my eyes. So it's it's weird. It's terrifying when they say like too big to fail. Like at this point, our government's too big to fail in any sense of the word. Like there's no responsibility and there's no accountability. No one goes to jail, and if they just don't like what you're saying, like you're just gone. Like
Hmm.
there's no ifs ands or buts about it. Um, Snowden, Julian Assange, like the most recent ones. They tried to
Yeah.
have Julian Assange murdered too, which is wild. So
Well, yeah, their whole purpose of keeping him locked up was thinking that he would just take care of the problem himself, to put it bluntly. Uh, that was their hope, was that he would just self-delete eventually from being locked up. And
right.
Cheryl Atkinson, she was a reporter back in the day during the Obama administration. She still has, I believe, a podcast and a couple websites. But she just released a Substack article today about the digital forensics that was done on her computers, where so she had done several stories on 9/11. She was covering what happened in Benghazi, along with several other big stories. And it was around the Benghazi time where she started noticing her computers doing weird things, like her personal computer at home. She'd walk into the bedroom in the middle of the night and it'd be on and doing stuff on its own. And
Yeah.
she thought she was just kind of losing it, or like maybe this is the update, or like, and then at one point she started noticing weird things with her CBS News computers and phones that she had with work. Um, there was monitoring happening with her home phone. So she ended up coming out with everything when she was at home, and her husband's computer started doing kind of the same weird stuff that hers was doing. And they immediately took the computer and they went to have it diagnosed. And, they described what was happening. And of course, there was certain CP material that was on the computer, but at the same time they know that like somebody else had accessed it. And they actually, at one point, they did have somebody from the intelligence agency, or maybe it was the FBI, admit that they were trying to put CP on his computer to get her to shut up.
Hmm.
And so she's been on this rampage of like trying to prove that there was monitoring of journalists that was happening, that they were getting into people's cell phones, landline phones, personal computers, work computers. And so like this recent Substack article, it just came out today, and I was reading it before coming on here, and it goes into detail about how they were able to figure out like how and when the computer had been accessed, and how time codes and timestamps had been changed and when, and to try to erase the fact that anybody had actually been there, when certain files had been erased. Like it was crazy, uh, the amount of stuff that they were able to find on these computers. And a lot of it was really just information of like people trying to hide the fact that they were on the computer to begin with.
Yeah. Yeah. That the footprint never completely disappears. You know, you can scrub computers as much as you want, but it's always some kind of footprint, you know, that's left behind. And especially when they try to leave open back doors, like within your like operating systems and stuff, like there's going to be a trace. Like they have to leave some kind of footprint behind. So it's just rough because, you know, like I said, there's not a lot of people within like the civilian world. I mean, there's a lot of people that can, but like the common person has no idea like what to look for or even how to go about it. People don't even know how to turn the computer on most of the time. I work in the IT world, so I know exactly like how to when I speak to customers, it's just like, well, how do you do this or how do you like turn the volume up? I was just like, what? Like, you know, like, how do you like I tell people like, oh, you need to reboot your computer. Like, what does that mean? And it's just like, oh, all right, come on, man. Like, you know, it's real here. Like, so you know, I understand completely, especially for people that are not very tech savvy, that they just completely goes over their head. But there's a lot of crazy stuff that can happen on your computer without you knowing, especially you're hooked up to the internet. Uh, People always should always use a VPN, like no matter what. It's it won't completely save you, but it works in a lot of instances. So
Personally,
uh,
I think that somebody just needs to come out with a burner laptop. And if burner phones work so well for drug dealers,
yeah,
just make a really cheap burner laptop. You have your external hard drive, you plug it in, it starts acting weird, throw it in the trash, get a new one.
I mean it's a very real thing. Like I spent a lot of time in the Middle East, so I know about like especially when it comes to like what do you call those? I forgot the name of the cell phone company. It's a lot in the Middle East. Like, there's a lot of burner phones, and they work very well because you just have like a little, um, like a phone. I forgot what it's called, like a phone card, like a little chip that goes in the
Yeah,
phone,
the
and you can
SD
just like
card.
swap. Yeah, like stuff like that. Like you can buy new phones, and they just like swap them out all the time, and you have different ones for different phones, and you know that kind of stuff happens all the time. When I was in the Middle East, that's kind of how we used to run with like phones and swapping out phones for different whatever, and it's very real. I mean, you could do it. The technology is there. I mean, you could buy those phones at Walmart, like those little cheap phones at Walmart. You can just
Yeah.
like swap them out. So I mean, it's there. It's a good idea actually about smarter laptop, even burner laptops. It's definitely something to look into. But just know that no matter what anybody does, like you're not safe on your computer. Passwords and all that kind of stuff means absolutely nothing unless you got some kind of password that's like over 15 characters, which is highly recommended. I recommend anything over 12 letters is perfect because the algorithm and like the tech to crack passwords is getting more and more advanced. But even like 10 and above is still hard to get past unless there's like some wildly awesome tech that we just haven't seen yet. But I I recommend anybody to have at least 12 characters in your password, at least like all of my passwords are like 18 characters or above. It's just like standard. It's hard to like memorize them and stuff, but um, everything that I have is like written down. I don't save passwords on my computer in like the vault and all that kind of stuff. Everything's written down like the old fashioned way. It's just written down and I have it just in case because it's easy. VPNs and all kinds of stuff, incognito tabs and just
Mhm.
Tor browsers and all that kind of stuff. It's just the way to go. If anybody, you know, but I mean, for like I guess the common person, I should say, shouldn't have any kind of issues with that. But um, yeah, it's good. I mean, passwords are important, especially with all these like weird information things that are happening, like with AT&T, where like a lot of people, like half of whoever was with AT&T lost like all their sensitive material, like they hacked in and took people's like phone numbers and emails and social security numbers. I was one of those. Like they sent me an email saying that it happened in my account, but uh, I don't really usually keep stuff like that online, so uh, I should be all right. But it happens. Data breaches happen all the time, so people get shit stolen. But
Yep.
it's wild. So, well, sir, I don't want to take up too much of your weekend. I really appreciate you coming on short notice. But I guess we can kind of break down here. You also mentioned previously that you were talking about we're taking doing research on the whole Pat Tillman thing, which was very interesting to me. I would like to have you on sometime in the future to kind of go over that as well because that's a very interesting but like heartbreaking kind of thing, especially for somebody that was in the military. Like to know that the country that you and it's not the people per se. Like I always have this thing where I criticize the government, but not the people and the idea of America because the people from that are in this country, I believe that I would take a bullet for anybody within the country. So I believe that the people in the US and the idea of the US as a whole is worth fighting for. It's just the government that are pieces of shit and the people that run it. So I that's kind of like where I draw the line because people are always like, "Oh, you hate America," and this, I'm just like, bro, like, like I signed up. I signed up. I wrote that check out up to and including my life for this country, and I would do it again in a heartbeat. But the people that run the government or that are in the government are just the biggest piece of shit you've ever met in your life. Like that's nothing to do with the people in the country and like the idea of the US as a whole. But like it's disheartening to know that the government would just completely throw you under the bus and like tarnish your name and do everything they can against you just to cover their ass. Like, like we mentioned earlier, like they completely screwed Pat Tillman over. The dude was an awesome individual. Like he gave up millions of dollars playing in the NFL to serve the country, and then they just fucked him over completely. And it's a terrible story, and like that is something that I would like to kind of go over in the future. So, I guess can you kind of give us like a rundown of I guess stories to be looking out for or things that you're working on in the future?
Oh, yeah. So, I've, yeah, I've been looking into the whole Pat Tillman thing. I don't know if I'm gonna end up writing about it or doing much more than I already have. Um, but Pat Tillman, kind of getting back into the whole Anthony Bourdain question about like what happened with him. I just finished reading a couple more books regarding his life and the final days of his life because there's some people on Twitter that are still convinced that he was like a KGB CIA operative
Mm,
that he had to be taken care of. But I think it's fairly obvious as to what happened with Bourdain, and it's more sad than it is anything else, especially just all the things he tried giving up for somebody who wasn't worthy of his attention and um other things. I've been looking a lot into OKC, but there's times where it's like you read a book or two on the topic and it's like you just need to take a break.
yeah,
Just
yeah.
let the information digest and move on from there. And there's constantly new stuff coming out about it. Like I mentioned earlier, the interview with Vassar,
Mm,
um, some of the things that he revealed about Yeekey and the bombing and the record keeping afterwards. And um, basically, the summary with that was Vassar and Yeekey were never supposed to be acknowledged as having been at the bomb site. Like, one of the things Yeekey was pissed about was Clinton comes into town and the OKCPD go and they present these people that were allegedly like heroes after the bombing, and Hiki's like, they weren't there. They weren't. That person wasn't there. That person was on vacation. Like, what is going on? um, so yeah, a lot of OKC stuff. And for a while, I was looking into the Las Vegas shooting, um, trying to
like
figure
the whole
out
Maui
stuff with
connection as
that.
well. That's
The
funny how
what?
that whole like Las Vegas shooting, I guess it was like the police commissioner who's now like in Maui. It's like he was the police commissioner that was there for Las Vegas as well. Yeah,
Yep. Yeah.
that's fun.
Yeah, there's so much information that really points towards God, I can't remember the dude's name now. The guy that allegedly did the shooting, where it looks more like he was a CIA op and that he was probably running guns for different three-letter agencies, and uh, like his girlfriend's sketchy past. Uh, how it was very obvious he was meeting other people at the hotel for a deal, and that deal turned into something else. So uh,
Mm.
been looking into that a lot, and there's some crazy theories about that too. Like you could just write a book about the theories and just like how off the wall they are when it comes to what had happened with that.
Yeah, it's interesting, man. There's a lot to cover. I mean, I feel like I've never. I guess recently, like since COVID happened and all this kind of stuff, I guess what you would call conspiracy theorists or conspiracy theories are like batting 1,000 at this point. Um, and everything that's was pretty far fetched out there in the past is just like all coming true. And it's definitely it hasn't been it's like a weird time for like truth to be coming out at this point. I don't know what it is, but like stuff's coming out about a lot of things like all at once, and I have a theory on why that might be happening, just like as a diversionary tactic to get off of like recent current events, like in the mainstream news, and like they're just trying to keep people occupied with other things, and they just kind of throw a bunch of data out there for everybody to get distracted. That's like a whole other thing, but like uh it's just a lot of interesting topics that have been kind of on the back burner for a long time, and all of a sudden like information's coming out, and it's awesome, but at the same time, it's kinda shitty because it's like it took so long for it to happen, and it's just like some wild stuff. But we'll definitely have to catch up again, discuss some of these other topics. But yeah, I guess just kinda let everybody know where they can find you and your work as well. I know you have Instagram and a YouTube channel as well, right?
Yeah, well, I had to move my YouTube channel because, like you, I kept getting videos taken down and strikes, and some of it was like, yeah, you posted this 3 years ago and you've had 13 views, and now we're gonna complain, and I'm
Yeah,
like, well, I've got videos on there of like when my oldest daughter, when she was like 2 or 3 years old, and in the background, and looking all cute and stuff, and it's like I don't want to lose that stuff.
yeah,
Um, so in the end, it was like there was one video I posted, and and it was about the weirdest thing. It was that movie on Netflix, Leave the World Behind,
right.
where I just did like a quick 5 or 10 minute movie review on it, talking about different things. And then within like a day or two, they're like, "You have a strike, and this violated our policy." And I'm
Yeah,
like, "Wait, what?" So, and then like a couple days after that, they picked a video from like 3 years ago, and they're like, "Just letting you know, we removed this." And I'm like,
yeah,
"For what?" And then after that, I was like, just I. So I started a whole new channel. I believe it's just called the Collapse Experiment, and I only have like maybe 4 or 5 different videos on there, and so it just, I don't know, YouTube just really left a bad taste in my mouth, to the point where it's like you don't really, you have your policies, but you don't really tell anybody what the policies are, and you can change them at any time. And they did that
yeah,
with Tim Pool recently, where a video from a couple years ago was taken down and he received a strike, and he was like, "Should we just remove all of our videos?" And they're like, "No, no, no, you don't have to do that." And he's like, "Well, you're gonna just take my channel down unless I do that, because it didn't violate your policy 3 years ago,
exactly.
but now you're mad about it."
But that's the shitty part is they sent me an email initially saying that they were gonna get rid of one video, like, oh, we got rid of this one video because of some wild random nonsense. It didn't even like have to do with anything. And then like I was like, oh well, that sucks, whatever. And then I sent it back for a review, and it didn't even get reviewed. Like I clicked it, and then they just came back like, nope, like it didn't let it didn't give me the chance to have them review it. I just clicked the button, and then it just came right back like, no, you're
Yep.
like that video's gone. And I was like, oh, what the hell? So I didn't think anything of it. I was just like, whatever, it's gone. So like the next time I came back online and I just was looking through the videos, like there was like 6 of them gone. They didn't even send me any notification saying that they were getting rid of them or anything. It was just one video, and all of a sudden, all these other ones were completely gone. And I was just like, what the hell? Like they didn't even send me like a warning that they were getting rid of them. They just all disappeared. So like there's like 6 or 7 of them that are gone now. On YouTube only. I have them like on
Hmm.
Rumble and all that stuff, but it's just like I was putting another show together at the beginning of the week, and you have a section in there where it lets you create hashtags and all that kind of stuff. And they don't even let you add hashtags for individuals. We're talking about like Soros and Rockefeller and all this kind of stuff.
Of course.
Um, and you can't even add the hashtag Soros. It doesn't let you do it. I tried it several times. I put it in there and I tried entering it, and it would just delete it completely. Like it didn't let me put it in there at all. It doesn't show up, and I would enter it like multiple times and try to save it, and it would just completely delete it. So it doesn't let you put it in there like at all. It let me put Rockefeller in there and like the Pritzker family and all this other stuff we're talking about. But that one name just doesn't they just let you add it. It's like
Hmm.
like what are we doing here? It's like it's odd, but I mean it's just I guarantee you once the elections are over, like it's gonna loosen up a little bit. It's just that major push right up to the election that they need to control. So
If
uh,
we even have an election, that's I'm starting to think that
yeah,
Roseanne is dead on with that prediction.
it's gonna be interesting to say the least. I look forward to it. I just want to see the kind of like nonsense that we get into at that point. Um, it's always interesting. It's always telling. Um, like the few months right before it, you have this whole thing with Bannon going to prison for exactly 4 months right before the election. July 1st, he's gonna have to report to prison, and his sentence is only like 4 months, which
Hmm.
he'll be out like immediately before the elections actually take place. So he won't have a chance to help anything out, like as far as like campaigning and all that stuff. And if anybody knows anything about what he was doing uh, with Trump's campaign in 2016, like he was the main reason those last 4 or 5 months prior to the election that Trump got over that hump. Like he was like crucial in that point. So that's what they're trying to get rid of as well. So uh, nobody could ever tell me anything that about how it's not election interference whatsoever, because all these people are going to jail for absolutely ridiculous reasons, and it's just one side. And
Right.
you didn't even have to be a supporter of Trump at all. Like, take him out of the equation. We're dipping our toe into this space within the legal realm that once that Pandora's box is open, like we won't be able to get back in the box because we start setting precedents like this where you can just arrest your political opponent, and now all of a sudden we're the Ukraine, because
Hmm.
that's exactly what happened in the Ukraine. Started closing down churches. He arrested all his political opponents, and like no election. Like they were supposed to be up for election like a month ago. Like he was up for election, like
Oh,
re-election.
that was canceled. Yep.
There was no like nobody to go against him. Like nobody was running against him because they were all in jail or whatever. And then he's just the president now forever until he decides or until they decide to get rid of him. So that's the slippery slope that we're on. Like get rid of Republican or Democrat makes no difference. If one side starts doing it to one, then when the other people are in charge, it's going to swing back the other way, and it's just going to keep going. And then all of a sudden, we're in a screwed up spot. So um, it's it's interesting just to kind of see what's going on, but it's going to be kind of rough. Um, But for everybody wants to take a look at Matthew's work, the collapseexperiment.com, Instagram, Matthew.Gilman, right? Is that what that is?
Yeah. I also have the Collapse Experiment of Substack, the YouTube channel. Had a podcast, but just I think I'm just
Work.
done with doing that.
I understand. Like I was gone for like a year. I lost like the drive to want to put stuff together. It's a lot of work, especially when you do it by yourself. It's like a lot of crap going on the backside. So
Yeah, and originally it was supposed to help like push I put out a new book, and podcast would hopefully like help push that. And it's like it got to the point where okay, I could either spend my time writing, which is what I want to do, or podcasting, which was becoming more tedious and just didn't have
the drive to do it.
didn't
Yeah.
yeah.
It's all about the
So
motivation to do it. Like I get it. Whenever I set dates, like I'm the only one responsible for it, reaching out to people and like booking people and setting up the interviews and then recording the interviews, doing the lives, doing the promos, social media, and then editing the videos afterwards and putting them up on everything. It takes me about like 5-6 hours a day just to kind of knock all that out. That's
mhm.
if I really sit down and focus on it, I can do it in like 3 or 4, whatever. But like I'm gonna have to like really sit there and do it. But I got other stuff going on, so it's like right now I still have another 3 hours to like do editing and all that good stuff on the backside. So that should be fun. Yeah, but yeah, man. Like I said, I appreciate it again coming on short notice. I know I just reached out in the middle of the week, like out of nowhere. So
Mhm.
I appreciate you throwing all that together for us. And we'll have all the links to all your work and everything down below in the show notes for everybody. I hope everybody had a great or is having a great weekend. I know we're trying to get out to this pool here in a while, so do all this editing and stuff and grab some food and jump in the pool and enjoy the rest of the week. It's been getting kind of hot out here, so uh, Texas weather is pretty crazy. It was just raining tornadoes last week and all that kind of stuff, and now we're
Mhm.
in the high mid 90s and the sun's out destroying people. So the humidity's out as well, so that's great. But it's like they say, if you don't like you don't like the weather in Texas, just wait 15 minutes. It'll change. So, um, yeah, I hope you guys stay safe out there. Everybody have a great rest of your weekend. And now summer's in full effect for kids, so everybody stay safe. Um, keep an eye on those kids as well. If you guys are already a subscriber, like we mentioned before, please consider hitting that subscribe button for us, as well as hitting that bell icon so you don't miss an episode in the future when we go live. Also hit that smash button, that like button as well. Sorry, so you guys can really help us out with the algorithms as well moving forward. Google Podcasts is going away. I think they're changing their whole thing or whatever platform they got going on. So that's going to disappear as well. We'll still be on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Amazon Music, at Truth Defender Podcast. We're on Rumble as well. Facebook is finally up and running. We got TikTok going as well. Twitter, Getter, all that good stuff. So you guys go ahead and share the link with a friend, family member, whatever you got going on. Questions for myself or a guest, as well as guest topic recommendations. You can shoot those over to the Truth Defender 1776 at gmail.com. I really appreciate you guys stopping in again. Enjoy the rest of the weekend. Stay safe out there. Stay blessed. Most of all, stay frosty.
Perfect.